Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Oh, come on. I hate to do that to you, but I do need a little love today. So thanks for bearing with me. My name is Rachel Morillo. I'm the Director of Public Engagement and Research here at the Institute of Contemporary Art, Philadelphia, and I'm just so happy to be with you all for this Leeway Foundation Grantee Panel. This is our third year, I want to say, doing it in partnership with the folks over at Leeway, and it's still one of my favorite things that we do here because I think panels like this are so rare and so necessary. It's doing this panel was really the first time that I saw a funder do this kind of prep for folks, and I've seen time and time again folks come here and then they're like, I applied and it was so helpful and I got a grant. And so I just want to say kudos to you all for being here. Thank you to all of the alums for being here to share their wisdom. And thank you to Leeway for your continual partnership with us. ICA is a place of possibility, and a lot of what we do is rooted in our belief that working in partnership creates a more resilient, thriving, and joyous world. And so partnerships like this really make my job worthwhile. I was saying earlier, for some reason, whenever I give an introduction, even if it's a small one, I always like to bring in other thinkers, other writers into the space. And lately, with the weather being what it is, the weather meaning, yes, like the fact that it was raining and now the sun is shining, but also just like the climate, the overall climate that we're living in. I have been returning a lot to The Undercommons by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten, but specifically the introduction written by Jay Halberstam. And so I thought I would, before I hand things off to Germaine, just read a couple of words or a few sentences from that introduction. And so it starts. It ends with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with, and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on the way to another place altogether. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what Black people, Indigenous peoples, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down the structure that right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know lie outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn shit down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desire that issues from being in the break. And so I thought that that was really apt for this grant, in particular because it is so much about social change and transformation. And that oftentimes people love to divorce art from politics, but this isn't what that space is. This isn't that kind of space, right? We know what we're here for. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to our panelists, and specifically to our amazing moderator for tonight, Germaine Ingram, dancer and cultural icon.
I should speak into the mic. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thanks for putting those words into the space. The Undercommons is really a very special text that I return to again and again. So thanks for seeding this environment with those words. I want to seed the environments with some additional words from Toni Morrison, and I had the nerve to try to amplify on her quote. This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we act, we dance, we sing, we sound, we make, we build. That is how civilizations heal. So I'm Germaine Ingram. I am a proud, long time. I think it might have been 2010 or 2008 or something like that, that I was a Transformation Award winner. And I'm also very proud to have been the chair of the search committee that resulted in Pia Agrawal becoming our executive director. So please stand, Pia. We're delighted to have you here and delighted to have you here. I'm really delighted to be here with this panel here tonight that Thanks so much. They represent a range of disciplines and experience, and we're really delighted to learn from their wisdom tonight. On my far left is Andrea Walls, a Transformation Award winner from 2021, is that right? And Candice Iloh, award winner in 2024, and Heather Raquel Phillips from 2020. I want to start just by reading the Leeway statement of purpose. You know, that's necessary, just like land acknowledgement. There we go.
So sorry. We actually think it might be the wire.
Foundation supports women, trans, and gender nonconforming artists and cultural producers working in communities at the intersection of art, culture, and social change. Through grant making, we promote artistic expression that amplifies the voices of those on the margins, promote sustainable and healthy communities, and work in the service of movements for justice. I also want to raise some key points with regard to the Transformation Award grant process. I'm sure you all have read the guidelines, and I hope you read them again and again. and certainly take advantage of the availability of Leeway staff to ask any questions, seek their guidance, because they're, talk about radical hospitality, that's the mantra of Leeway staff. But let me just go over some key points. The grant covers the geography of the Philadelphia area, which includes Bucks, Camden, Delaware, Montgomery, and Philadelphia counties. Leeway takes an expansive perspective on what an artistic practice is. So don't feel that your practice is beyond the scope of this grant. The Leeway Transformation Award was the first time that I saw a hair braider receive a major grant. So if you feel that you're an artist, don't question whether your discipline is one that is not embraced by this grant opportunity. Decisions are made by consensus process, by a community-based panel of artists and cultural producers. That's significant. The board of Leeway, the staff of Leeway are not the people who make the decision with regard to this grant. There is just a tremendous effort on the part of Leeway to bring together artists and community workers who not only have the expertise to bring to this process, but have the spirit of fairness and equity and have, should I say, perspicacity to see beyond the surface and bring real well-wishing, I would say, a spirit of well-wishing to this process of selecting artists for the Transformation Award. I think you all know that it's a $15,000 unrestricted award to women, trans, and gender nonconforming artists and cultural producers creating art at the intersections of art and social change, artists and cultural producers who have been doing this work for at least 5 years and have a long-term commitment to continuing that type of work. Again, it's not a project grant. It's a grant that's intended to recognize the work that people have already done and the work that they have a long-term commitment to. You can use it however you want. If you want to apply it to a project, that's perfectly fine, but you can buy a refrigerator with it, you can buy a heater with it, you can go on vacation with it, you can buy shoes with it. There are usually 10 to 12 awardees per year. It's a 2-stage process, as I think you know. The deadline for the first stage is May 15th, and about a third of, based on the history, about a third of the stage 1 applicants go on to stage 2, where there's an opportunity to be more expansive with regard to your artistic practice and where there is request for work samples. So again, read the application guidelines really carefully, ask questions if you have them. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions here this evening, but I just wanted to share with you sort of the high points of the application process. So before I invite the panel into this discussion, I'm going to take a point of privilege and share some thoughts that I have about this process and any grant process that you might be inclined to pursue, especially in these really challenging times when the opportunities are getting thinner. When I came in today, I got this button that said, "Leeway loves you." And And what I'm inclined to say is, don't spend your time applying for a grant where the grant maker doesn't love you enough, doesn't love artists enough to create a process that is really generative for you. Create a process where if you apply yourself to it, then at the end of that process, you know more about yourself as an artist. You know more about who you are and what your intentions and what your ambition is. And it seems to me, I mean, we all want the money, but it also seems to me the case that if you pursue a grant from that kind of funder, which Leeway is and has always been, then when you push that submit button, you already won, because you know more about yourself. You have a greater sense of confidence in your ability to articulate who you are as an artist, and a greater ability to walk in the world as the artist that you are. The other thing I would say to you, and this is kind of a corollary to the first, I guess, it's that don't apply for this unless you've really invested in doing your best to share who you are as an artist. You know, we're all in a situation at times where we say, well, you know, I don't think I have the time to do my best, but what's the harm in pursuing this? Well, there is a harm, because you never want to be known as half-stepping. Whether, you know, we've seen very often, especially at Leeway, people who don't get the award come to the attention of artists and cultural workers who said, you know, that's someone special. That's someone I want to follow. That's someone that I want to support. And so never think that it doesn't matter, that, you know, I'll just apply for it and see what happens. Put your best foot forward with this. And if you feel that you don't have the time or the energy or the, you know, or the motivation to do that, my recommendation is not to do it. You can do what you want to do, but my recommendation is not to do it. The other thing is that, you know, you don't want a panelist of Leeway to see your name come up in another context and already have a certain impression of who you are as an artist because you haven't done your best in presenting yourself at Leeway. So that's, you know, as I say, you do what you want to, but that's my recommendation. Okay, so I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce yourself, and also I want to recognize Victoria. She's, you know, she's doing special service for us today. It's really important for us. It's really important to our sense of inclusiveness. So thank you, Victoria, for helping us, supporting us tonight. So I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to just talk about who you are. I should say my pronouns are she and her. And so I'm going to ask you to also share your preferred pronouns and just talk to us a brief time about what your practice is, what's important to you now, especially in this really royal time for artists and for everyone who cares about justice and democracy. So I'll let whoever is ready to go for it.
Well, I'll just jump in. I don't know, can you all hear me? My name is Andrea Walls. I am the founder and creative director of Museum of Black Joy. And when I find the root of this work that I'm doing that is focused on joy, it goes back to my first Leeway grant, a project grant, which was to create a website for my book of poetry that's rooted in the kind of trauma of having a bomb dropped on my neighborhood back in 1985. And it was the culmination of about a 20-year process of kind of trying to reckon with that grief and having it embraced by Leeway at a time when nobody was trying to have those conversations, and when you showed up wanting to read a poem about you trying to find your humanity in that story, people were like, nah, I'm trying to get tenure. I can't invite you to throw that grenade into the language of poetry. And so that was a real work of working through trauma. And Leeway funded that space for me to create a website so I could give the book away, because I didn't want to sell it, because I didn't want there to be a tax base, because they used our taxes to bomb us. So Leeway supported this vision in a way that nobody else did. And it really set me up. It was the seed for me to get here now, where I realized it's not sustainable to live in that trauma, even as I couldn't figure out how to share that work without traumatizing the audience as I had traumatized myself. And so it led me to this next place where survival will leave you, and that's in the joy of your survival and your capacity to thrive, even though you've been through some things. So thank you, Leeway.
Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay. Good evening. My name is Candice Eloh. Pronouns are they, them. And I am an author of young adult novels. In particular, I am a novelist that challenges form. So 2 of my novels, Everybody Looking and Salt the Water, are written in verse. And like most of my work, or I would say all of my work, I create coming-of-age stories that are accessible intergenerationally, as well as across a spectrum of mental health issues amongst teenagers. And simply put, Leeway just helped me to keep going. I am a full-time author, and the publishing industry really makes you work hard to make enough money to take care of yourself. And so Leeway was my second grant ever, and I feel like what was mentioned earlier, it is an application that really is about who you are rather than just what you have done. So I feel like it is an application that really had me asking really layered questions about what it is that I create work for. And we're in a time of mass book bans and tons of stories that I didn't even have as a high schooler coming off library shelves, classroom shelves, and being pulled off by parents and officials who have not read these books at all. But they simply represent young people as their full selves. And so Leeway, out of all the grants I've ever applied for, seemed to be a grant opportunity where they're interested in how you challenge all of these kind of isms that make it hard for you to be an artist in this world. And I was led here by other Philadelphia authors, or not authors, artists, who have gotten the opportunity to have this award and keep doing their work as well.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Heather Raquel Phillips. Thanks for having me here too. It's gonna take me time to get back to the question. My pronouns, she, her, they, them, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist. So I'm based in photo, but I love video. I make textile pieces in the forms of banners and flags, pennants. I write as well, something that sprung up somehow, and as a person who uses multiple spaces to create things, I try to let the idea and the medium kind of meet in the middle somewhere. So whatever makes sense for the concept will get realized in that particular medium. Leeway, yeah, how can I just expand on that briefly? When I talk about Leeway, I talk about a place where I feel seen and appreciated. Like that's the bottom line, and what the previous panelists spoke about, and just kind of expanding on that a little bit, is that there's in a world that minimizes people in the margins for the experiences that we have, Leeway allows a space for like the embrace of that and how that molds and shapes our adult lives, our lives as artists and makers, cultural creators, and social changers. And I think I've not experienced that in a lot of spaces. Like this is a rare gem, and we're so fortunate to have it here in Philadelphia. So I'm gonna leave it there.
Okay, thank you. As I read each of your background, it struck me that each of you, in a different way, works in preservation and connection to ancestral traditions. And I'd like for you, if you would, to talk more about how that is a driver for your practice. And I ask that question because I want to emphasize the need for specificity and particularity about how you go about your artistic intention. I call it a theory of action. It isn't about just what you do, it's how you do it and why you do it. That is really the the meat of what panelists are typically looking for in a Leeway transformation artist. So if you could, take a moment to think about it, but if you could talk more about how ancestry, preservation, restoration is part of your practice.
I'll start. I write because I really want people to read. And I know that reading personally as a Black person and someone who got to know myself like well after college, I write for there to be a space where young people in their fullness, they have a place to go and process their emotions. And I found that as a young person, me finding books where I could relate to the characters really helped me to learn how to talk about myself and talk about how I feel and talk about the people in my life and the experiences that I have. And that is something that I feel artists like myself, other writers, other authors have done before me, which is continue to talk about themselves and write about themselves, take photographs of themselves. Like I learned who these artists were through their own works. And so, I don't know, I feel like my work is one of preservation largely because books are something that are kind of like, even if they're not books about history directly, they are like histories of how we felt at different times and how we responded to different times and who we were at different times. And I just really want to contribute to young people having books that felt relevant to when they were 15, 16, 17, 18 and it not just be, their archive in their Instagram or their archive in their blog or online, but like books that have full stories where, they can look back and remember. I feel like memory is a big part of our cultural preservation, like remembering through our own personal documentation who we really were.
I can share in relationship to my own ancestors. I started calling on them, like asking specifically for help. I will say things like, come through, grease my tongue, let me articulate my purpose in a way that will make what I'm doing seen and heard. Now, the Leeway application is hard. You have to know that going in. And when I say hard, I mean you have to be present with it. You have to pay attention to the question. You have to answer the question. Now, it took me, I got the Transformation Award on my 4th try. And none of the 3 that went before were wasted. Some of them maybe. I waited a little bit to the last minute, which I'm very much an 11:57 kind of applicant. Sometimes I tell myself that's part of my process, but as I grow as an artist, I realize, no, that's just because, I've been putting things off. And so now I try, definitely you want to get at least a 30-day run-up. And of course, if you're applying for the transformation, you've been doing work for at least 5 years. So you know what your work is. But have you crystallized the language? Are you relying on jargon that every other application is going to be? Are you going to use the word community 87 times? Because that's real, because we're working in our community. But do you know the impact of your work? Have you asked the people who have engaged with your work? I've been in a workshop with Ellen. I know what the impact is. So ask me when you're ready to apply. And I've got photographs. But I've gone just solo on my own so many times where I don't ask anybody, I don't get a reader. Most of that was because of my own self-doubt. Leeway makes space for you to figure it out and to ask those questions with them. They really want you to get it. They don't make the decisions, but they give every resource that you could possibly come up with. Use it. And if you don't get it, apply again, because it's for you. It's really for you. But yeah, get in there with your ancestors. Ask them, what do I need to do to be real about this? How do I put this self-doubt? How do I name my purpose? Because if you're making work, you're an artist. If you're an artist and you fit the demographic, it's for you. It's a matter of following that path of your purpose to receive the award. Because it's in your future, I promise you.
Did you want to embroider on that?
Yeah,
don't
I
have
guess.
to.
I will
Okay.
briefly, just on the ancestry preservation and restoration. I work in 2 tracks, so documentary and also conceptual, or more like my own playland, like little fantasy world. And so in the documentary, it's kind of straightforward. It's documenting something, and it's holding that, and it's preserving something. It's whatever the focus may be. It's something that I want to communicate to a larger audience. But in the other aspect, where I'm doing experimental kind of films and playing with friends and community and with roles and collaboration, that to me is also a way of preserving. It's a way of restoring, because I'm I'm building a moment in a film, and there is a sort of time leap to the future, to the current, and to the past. So I'm building maybe a history that's not seen, but I'm showing it. Like, there's existence here, and I think that that's like really, the more I look at that work and that part of my practice, it becomes evident to me how important that aspect is, if not the most important part of it. So.
I want to ask you about a part of the Leeway application that's really distinctive, the experience page. You know, I see that more and more foundations are using that type of approach, but Leeway's been doing it for a long time, letting go of the standard, vita, and giving people an opportunity to identify 4 to 10 experiences. Could be personal, professional, artistic, but 4 to 10 experiences that have been really critical to helping you to define and feel your practice as a social practice artist. Can you talk about what your experience was in identifying those experiences and selecting one that you amplify? Yeah, and what's really important here is that applicants not turn that question into a curriculum vitae. I was giving feedback to one artist who was applying, and they put on as an experience, graduated from college such and such a year. I said, who cares? So, I mean, that's something, that's meaningless unless there is something specific about that experience that you can share as to being really pivotal. So if you'll talk about how you approach that, because many people find that a really challenging exercise in the application.
I would love to talk about that a little bit.
Please do.
I think it's such a special part of the application. And I actually want to give a shout out because I am on the board of directors at the Leather Archives and Museum. And I've just created with the director an artist residency and brought in the Leeway application to say, like, this is a good application mold. Yeah, like this is righteous and this feels fair, and it highlights something different. And I might have put my college experience on there, but I also was a non-traditional college student. So I did everything as an adult, and I worked through it, and I was first-gen educated as well. So those things can have those little, and you mentioned that, right? Unless there's a thing, but like my first answer, and I read through these today on the transformation grant, was talking about my father being incarcerated and helping him and working through the system, all these different prisons that he was in to get out. And like that's nothing that, like that's a taboo to talk about in a lot of spaces. And so to have it be something that like this is really an informative part of who I am as a person. It's something I dealt with as a child, and it's something I dealt with as an adult. And to be able to put that in the forefront of this thing and feel like it had the weight, like it's supposed to be there. This is a big part of who I am and why I make the work I make. And I think that stands for all of those, for all of us that apply, is like, why are we making social change work? How does this occur in a person and an artist, right? And I think those are those, like that's the CV of life, right? And yeah, it's a really, I think it's a really lovely way to enter something that you're applying for that's so unique and special. So
I thought it was such a brilliant, the first time I applied, it just felt so good because at the time I didn't have a degree when I first applied. And I finally finished school after several aborted attempts, like when I was in my 50s. But like to not have to frame what I do in that kind of way that always left me feeling outside, I just felt, wow, this is brilliant. And then the year that I did get the Transformation Award, something that was so authentic to what I was going through in that moment that was life-changing. I was caregiving for my mom. Like, and if you haven't done that work yet, nobody can prepare you for it. That kind of 24/7 caregiving to people who may or may not have had the energy or sensibility to care for you, and to have that role reverse. And I just wrote about it because they're asking about art and social change. And it's like, how many people walk away from that responsibility? Like staying here and doing this while maybe suspending my art practice is definitely the social change. And finding an artistic way, like one of the things, my mother grew up in church. And I would be coming in talking about, how are you today? Well, she sucks. She's an independent person who has to be cared for. That's a dumb question. So what is the art of care? What matters to her? So I started coming in saying, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. She can't argue with me on that, because that's her thing. So I had to use my creative self to respond to a caregiving situation, and it's all art. And so that was the experience that I expounded on the year that I received the award, because it was real, and I was in it, and it was hard, and I said so. And that's the brilliance of those questions. Like you don't have to impress somebody with, your 4.0. Of course, that's awesome if that's, part of your story. But it could be the thing that is making you who you are in that moment that they want to hear about. I think it's a brilliant way.
When I was trying to gather significant experiences, I kept actually thinking about what I was hearing in the information sessions. I applied to the Leeway Transformation Award twice. Didn't get it the first time. The second time, I told myself I would go to every information session, every opportunity I could talk to a staff member, I did it. Called them, emailed them, all the things. And when I was trying to gather experiences, I remember last year, this time, pretty much like this first information panel, I was told, make your application a story. Like, what things could you string together that could tell the story of why you are the way that you are and the work that you do? What would paint like a full image of what has changed you and shaped you into the artist that you are? And so it made me think about, I think I highlighted my first attempt at a one-person show. And it was just a works in progress event that I did. And I had done it back in 2018. And, it wasn't like as big of a production as I've seen a lot of my friends in New York do. But it was significant because I was a writer who tried something visual and performance-based, and I knew nothing of what I was doing when I did it. I applied for a fellowship back then, and I learned what a stage manager is, and I learned about lighting cues, and I learned about all these things. And the application helped me pinpoint moments when I did things that really shaped what was important to me, what I was capable of, how I engaged with communities around me, how I didn't do these things by myself. And it was me, going out and connecting with other artists that made these things possible. And so it really was like, you know, defining moments. What are these moments that you went through, you experienced, you witnessed, where you pushed yourself, and then it made you this person, and it helped you shape this point of view. And so, yeah, like what stuck with me was being told, make it a story, make it a narrative. From beginning to end, keep showing them these things that like kind of shaped your creative DNA.
Can I add that it could also be the time that you had an epic failure and what you learned from it? Like, what other resume can you share the story of something you gave 100% and did not, like, work out that time?
Yeah, it's an opportunity to show your vulnerability as well as your prowess. Because as Andrea said, sometimes those failures are the things that are the experiences that are most instructive. And let me embroider a bit on what Candice said about, you know, making it a story. Some of the best advice I've heard about developing a grant application was from a Pew program officer who said, you need to choreograph your application. You know, we have themes and variations in choreography. Think of this entire document not as separate questions and answers, but an opportunity to weave together a whole integrated piece. You know, you might not think about it necessarily choreographically, but there's some analog in your practice. It could be you know, chapters and verses, but finding that connection and thinking about it in a way that draws the reader from beginning to end. Anticipate the questions that the panelist is going to have, and you know, I've been on enough panels that I know that, you know, when a question comes to me in response to one question on the application, where I find the answer in the next response, I said, oh yeah, they've got it. You know, they've got me hooked. And that's what we want to do. We want to draw the panelists, draw the reader through that entire application. You know, decide what you want to tell that reader and figure out a way to tell that whole story in the course of the application and take them from beginning to end. I want to, you know, some people think that you have to be an established artist in order to get a transformation award. And you can be an emerging artist, you can be a mid-career artist, you can be an established artist, you can be as old or older than me. Our youngest recipient is 19 years old, is that right, Melissa? 19 years old, okay. So, you know, I just want to ask you, panelists, how, if at all, that, you know, sort of that breadth showed up in your application, how you thought of yourself in the context of where you are in your career. You know, obviously age is not, you know, does not define where you are in your career journey. And I was thinking today that, you know, I can, you know, every time I start a new project, I'm emerging. You know, there are some areas where I consider myself, you know, very practiced and experienced, but there are other places where I consider myself a complete novice. And I hope that's the case until, you know, until I put a foot in the grave. But, you know, talk about the complexity of, you know, sort of figuring out where you are in your artistic journey and how that plays a role and the way you respond to this application.
I mean, I feel like I mean, The only way I know how to respond to that is really all of the applications that I had, like, gotten rejections on. It is the amount of failures that I've experienced that really let me know how far I'd come. And I don't know, I feel like Leeway, like in the application, these, I think it's the first 5 or the first 6 questions you get. Even in the first stage of the application, it feels really daunting to answer these questions because they start to all sound the exact same. But you find that after I've been rejected from many applications between the first time I applied and the last time that I applied. And I feel like that's what taught me where I was in my career. All of those times that I got rejected from opportunities and still didn't get feedback, it kind of showed me like the small things that I am gathering from this entire experience of being an artist. I think I'm answering your question, but I feel like Leeway really, I feel like I don't know, I feel like the difference between my first application and this application was that I really learned how to speak to what those rejections were about, what I couldn't answer at that time, what I didn't know about my artistic practice, things I didn't know how to do yet. Yeah, I feel like a really successful application in this process is one that is full of like self-reflection. I feel like that is really a determining factor of where you are in your career, is like your ability to reflect on all those last rejections that you had, I guess.
So I would say when I applied for my first project grant with Leeway, I thought of myself principally as a poet. Because I had been writing these poems, trying to find the humanity in the so-called move bombing. And I had been writing them just to write them, but it wasn't until I got the leeway to place them somewhere. Like even I've been doing the work, but I didn't feel like a poet until I had the venue for the poems. And so Leeway gave me, 1, the money, and 2, the confidence. Oh, it's in the world, so I'm a poet. And in that experience, I was like, well, what if people don't like to read? What about visual learners? And so I started making these kind of like weird digital films taking a historic context, because I felt to understand how that bomb got dropped, you needed to know the whole history of, from the Middle Passage on to understand how people could make those decisions on that day. So that started my life as a visual artist. And then when I shared one of my visual pieces, somebody said, oh, you should apply to Women's Mobile Museum, which I did. So then that gave me a year of skill building around photography. And so now, I'm a visual artist. And so each seed planted by the sport that I've gotten from Leeway has made me an emerging everything. Now I did my first immersive thing at the Color Girls Museum, where I did an AR garden, thinking I was talking to the future. Now I know that tech won't be supported 2 years from now, so the actual photographs are the real thing talking to the future. And so, like this thing, and I think most of us feel this way now, like everything is genre expansive. No, I think we used to think of people as like one thing or another. Now we're finding every possible way. I'm obsessed with sewing now, so not that I've actually sewed anything, it's just like an obsession. So like it just is growing. What is the venue to tell the story you're trying to tell in the moment? So it's always new. Like you said, you're always emerging into whatever the latest thing is.
You know, that's fine. I just wanted to mention, you know, it came up in these questions, the fact that Leeway provides feedback, and if you want it, and Melissa laughs, but that's another place where Leeway shows its love for artists and its intention to make this grant process one that is really generative for artists. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up for your questions. Leeway always asks, how do you define your community, and what are the strategies that you utilize in community building? You all have begun to talk about that to some degree, but if there is more that you'd like to share about your intentionality in identifying and connecting with particular communities and building breadth and depth with those communities, and you know, I have a question about how you sustain relationships with those communities, because every project I've had, you know, you can't get rid of folk once once you've done a project. So how do you build relationships with communities so that you don't feel that you're abandoning them after that discrete project is over?
Community is such a charged word in a way. I consider myself a lone wolf, and then I consider my people also lone wolves, and like we found this oddball pack, and it works. You know, when I look around at my friends and my chosen family, it is that everybody kind of doesn't fit into a compartment that maybe they are pushed to be in, and so that's sort of my immediate, and then the communities that I extend out from that. So those are the people that maybe I work with in my more like experimental, narrative, fun work, and that expands, right? When I meet somebody and I go, hey, you know, you wanna come play? Like, you wanna put on a costume? You wanna not? Like, what? You know, and that builds that, and then I see them connecting, and that means a lot to me, because now we're all finding other people with shared values, interests, hearts that otherwise don't look like they're the puzzle to go together, and that's important to me. But then beyond that, working with the leather community and how I have navigated that in different areas, and it started in the Mid-Atlantic area in a title position that I was in, and I hope this, I'm not explaining more because it's like I'll open up the Bilko doors and then we all have to go down into this underground world, and that's a lot. But that community has like expanded. Like the project that I did funded by Leeway started Mid-Atlantic, and then it's branched out, and because of that too, it's branched me out, because I'm the artist, so I'm the one that's going and making the connections and meeting people. So it'll go to Atlanta for the second time in June, and it was in Fort Lauderdale last winter, and each place I go, you know, I get to meet new people, and then that just sort of spreads. And so, but anywhere I go, there I am, and I think that that's what it is that like, that's the heart of me, and that's something that I don't know I possess, or maybe it's something that we possess, right? And that's been the way I've operated. So it could be on my block, or it could be out of state, right? And staying there, like caring about the people that I meet, caring about the people that I work with, nurturing those relationships is important and valuable. I hope I answered it. I'm not sure.
Whether you answered it or not is profound, what you said.
I have the blessing as a photographer of holding on to this kind of grassroots archive. So my community, like I keep the record of things that happen. And I want to share something. I had a young person who was looking at some of my photographs say, I never get invited any of these places. I was like, nary a person invited me anywhere. I just started showing up with my intention to document non-traumatic Black life in Philadelphia and beyond. And the thing that I learned, going into spaces, if I had been like, oh, I'm Andrea Walls, a photographer, I would not have maybe been able to show up as strongly. But once I coined that Museum of Black Joy, that identity that is not me, but this intention of just uplifting equal time for joy, that let me roll into any space saying, you know, this is for the Museum of Black Joy. And the other thing, as a poet, I felt like I had to keep perfecting these lines, and it drove me crazy. But as a photographer, I'm okay if it's a little fuzzy, if you can see the choreography of joy in a body. I'm not judging myself. And so when I show up with that energy and that intention, the community reflects back, and then next thing you know, we're learning this new line dance with the fan, and like, and it just grows and grows and grows. And so what I've been saying, my work is not so much to speak truth to power, because we don't agree on the truth, but to speak joy to power. There's nowhere to go. Like, you can't fight me if we're like uplifting joy. And so that's how I've kind of found this new robust relationship with any community that I'm in. Candice?
I think my communities have pretty much been the same the whole time. Prior to me being a full-time author, I was a high school teacher for a little bit over 10 years. And that is when I discovered both my deep love for young people and also my deep passion for the stories that are centered around their lives. And so I never quite leave the communities that I'm creating about or with or on behalf of, because they are like the life force of what I'm writing. And I kept thinking about, when you were asking the question, how building community or building creative or artistic community has gone hand in hand with building friendships here in Philadelphia. Like, I moved to Philly with no friends. I knew 4 people prior to moving here that lived here, and we were not close. And this was 5 months before COVID hit. And so ultimately that put me in a position where I kind of had to just keep putting myself out there. And like, prior to COVID hitting, I tried to go to events and show up to other people's things, just to show interest in other people's work and to see what's going on around me and in this city. And at the same time, like, just showing myself friendly. And my creative community and my friendships have started to kind of blend. And then the communities that come along with my number one, like, target audience, young people, is their parents and adults who love those young people. And so I feel like while I'm learning to build friendships as an adult, I'm also learning how to maintain my creative communities, how to, like, after the event, ask each other out for coffee, or have people come over your house and share work, having moments of not just connection, but like checking in on what's going on with each other's work and seeing what points overlap. And so I feel like my friends and my creative community are one and the same. And the young people that I serve, that, you know, they're just all up and through because it's very intergenerational.
I mean, there's no one way to answer this, except to say, you know, you don't want to see an application. Well, I serve everybody. You know, we want to see the kind of specificity and particularity that shows that you intend to have a real connection, that there are certain messages that you want to share with people that you feel connected to, that you feel responsible to, that you feel accountable to. I mean, I think that's the bottom line. Who do you feel accountable to? And how do you measure that? How do you measure that accountability? And if you can't answer that question of who you feel accountable to, then that's, you know, that's a real challenge. You know, it's not that you don't want to speak to a broader audience, but the question is, you know, who am I speaking to? Who is my message primarily for? And who do I care? Who do I care most about in terms of their response, their feedback to the work that I do? I'm going to open up the floor to questions now. I can't see that far. Tell me how many minutes? 10 minutes, okay. 10 minutes. Okay. 10 minutes. Sure.
And then do you want
Okay.
sorry.
Take a rest.
If you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you. Hey. Oh, this is loud. Hi, guys. It's a really long application. It's really thorough. What do you think was the most difficult part to you?
I felt the subtle differences in the questions, because somebody else said it. Is this the same question? Am I, you know? And I had to really pay attention to where that subtlety was, so that I wasn't just reiterating the same thing over and over. I found that to be very challenging. And that's why I say it's not one of the ones that you could just kind of do overnight, based on the fact that you have you've answered a lot of questions over time. And I do recommend keeping your bio and artist statement, those things, like in a file for last minute opportunities. But with this one, you just have to build some quiet space around each question. And I honestly wouldn't try to do more than one in one sitting, you know?
Yes. Thank you so much. It was beautiful. I could hear you all evening. Thank you so much. I am doing this, I'm a cultural producer, right? So I will be applying this grant as a cultural producer. I know you all beautiful artists, and my work is because of all of you, you know what I mean? So I really wanted to ask you a question, and I don't know if you can let me know about that. When I'm talking about communities, I represent two communities. One is artist community, and second is who walks into the gallery. Again, any input you want to put in as a cultural producer, anything you want to add to it, to my application. Andrea, I was hoping that you'll talk about a little bit museum as a founder and director, so I would really take any input. I don't know if I ask a question, but I'm basically asking as a cultural producer, what do you think, how I should answer the community part? Like, do I define it all, or do I make sense with that question?
Yeah, I absolutely, I think so. I mean, there was a time when curators weren't thought of as artists.
Same here. I'll be going in that capacity, curator and culture producer.
I'm sorry.
Curator and cultural producer, yes.
Right, and you have an artistic intent. And so I don't see how your challenge is any different from someone who's a photographer or a writer or a disciplinary artist. I mean, they're curating too. So it seems to me that you're all part of that same circle. And there are certain people that you want to talk to. There's people who come to a gallery, but how do you get them there? How do you craft a message that brings a certain audience that you want to have a conversation with? I say that the way that I try to relate to audiences is I want to invite them into my curiosity. I'm not trying to teach anybody anything or convince anybody of anything. Now, if they're convinced or if they learn something in the process, that's fine. But my principal aim is to invite them into my curiosity. And so, I define my community on that basis. Who might be curious enough to, come into this space and appreciate the questions, the inquiries, what's driving the questions that drive my work. And it seems to me it's the same thing for you as a cultural producer.
And I would add that think of who inspires you. You're the audience for the things and pieces of work that you're inspired by. So how do you reverse engineer that experience? Because I'm like the Harlem Renaissance, Black Arts Movement. They weren't necessarily speaking to me, but there was something there for me that I now operate from as my gift to Black culture.
No, I love the accessory part. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Gloria Kincaid, and I am Leeway Transformation awardee from 2018. And I'm going to say this is a great panel. I love everything you said. You were saying things that I was thinking or hadn't even written down. In fact, talking about the feedback, I'll tell you my experience with Leeway. I applied in 2006. And I got to the second session, and I was like, wow, it was the first time I applied. And it really made me feel great. I had a friend help me because I didn't feel like I was a writer and just reading the application. And I like what you're saying, that you have to read the application and answer each one, but that was hard for me. All I knew is that I teach line dancing, and I consider myself an artist. I've been doing this for 20 years plus, and just like you said, they're doing the boots on the ground, we're trending, but I consider myself an artist. So this is a grant for an artist, for social change. I saw all of it, people were telling me this, but I didn't know how to put it in words. So sometimes you have to ask for help. But didn't get it in 2006. But I didn't give up. I continued to apply, and what I really enjoyed, like you said, feedback. Leeway has gotten better with their feedback, because they used to give you a little feedback over the phone or something, then it's like, ooh, what did they say? They give it to you in writing, okay? To have sessions like this, to talk to other people. This is good stuff, okay? And the other thing I want to say is, one of the things I felt I did is selecting the area. People think of dance as performance. I said, but we're not just performing. This is a whole culture. This is a folk art. We get, the clothes we wear, the things we do when we meet. It was all types of things that I really felt like that was the main thing about what I'm doing. The community, the family, So I focused on that. And then secondary was the performance. So sometimes you might have to look at that. Look at the things that is considered social change. You have an art. You're an artist. I'm an artist. I have 3 grandchildren. My middle grandchild always, You think of artists writing and scribbling, and he's just an artist, period. And we're nurturing that, but we don't know all the categories. So you went multicultural, you have to decide what area, so that's going to be helpful too. How you define yourself, and you might need some feedback or some information from some other people. These sessions are excellent for people who have gotten the grant. Thank you.
Thanks for your testimony, Gloria. Thanks for testifying. And I just want to embroider on that a bit from the standpoint of, you hear people say, well, I don't do grant speak. I don't write that. There are no magic words. And I think Leeway especially makes it possible for people to communicate in the way that feels most comfortable for them. What's most important is that we feel this sense of commitment and authenticity in your application. There are no magic words, there's no grant speak. It helps to be able to put together a coherent sentence. But it's become just an excuse, to say that there has to be some, special language or special rhetoric. That's certainly not the case with Leeway. So figure out how you want to talk about yourself. The words will come.
Hi, I just want to say, first off, thank you so much for all of you being so vulnerable and, talking about your experiences. I definitely am going to walk away with a lot of gems. Like, I have a lot of notes from everything that you guys have been saying, so it's been very impactful. I remember somebody on the panel said that you will learn more about yourself after receiving the award. And I want to ask, how much have you changed? And how have you grown? Or, did you learn more about yourself after receiving this?
You want to respond to that?
Sure. I think that going through the application itself really makes you look within. And I think that Leeway being a place that allows you to be who you are, allows you to or allowed me, I'll say, to sort of situate myself more in that space as a person in the arts. And I'm in, I work at Penn, so there's a lot of uncomfortable spaces that I exist in. And then I know that there's other places that are like, be you. And so those things lining up have just allowed me to know that a little more. I am not for everybody, and I'm okay with that, right? And being in places where I am okay helps, right? Just to know that there is a space. And you said vulnerability, and I've been thinking about that through, somebody else said it earlier, is that you can be authentic here, and you can't be authentic without being vulnerable, right? And you can't be an artist without being vulnerable, right? And as an artist, we're making the social change. Politicians make policy. This is a quote of Brother West, but politicians make policy, artists make change. And so I think all that together really is it's a formula, and you can be supported in that formula from here. So I hope that answers a little bit.
It did, thank you.
And I would like to add, sometimes not getting it is what you need too, because not getting the things you really want makes space for you to get real with, are you going to do this work anyway or not? It's am I just trying to get this money, or am I really trying to do this work? And sometimes the reach and the process and the having to overcome the fact that you didn't get it is the thing that will spur you to the time that you get it. And I'll just share, as I said, I got it on my 4th try, and it was truly a transformation award because it allowed me to usher my mother through the last 6 months of her life without me having to worry about, how am I going to eat while I do this work. So like I said, not getting it those 3 times was a big blessing.
Candice, I'm going to give you the last word if you'd like it.
I mean, in short, it just really taught me how to sharpen. It was mentioned earlier, kind of like using buzzwords like community over and over. I really, like, I really felt like the application really got on my nerves. Like, it was just really, I really felt like, you know, in going through the questions and then going to the second stage, I was just like, how many times are you going to ask me that? And what it helped me realize was they weren't asking the same thing. They were asking you to get more specific. So it just really taught me how to just really, I don't know, just like go all out, like be as specific as possible. Stop trying to be universal in your responses and be honest about why it is that you do what you're doing. Because I feel like Leeway is like really a place where they care about like, why are you doing this? Like, not if you're able to make really beautiful things or like produce these high level things, but like, why are you doing it? And how are you actually living those things that you say that you're about, I guess.
Just one more thing I would say. I think more than any other funder I've experienced on either side of the aisle, Leeway tries to position its awardees for other things. You know, how many times have we seen Leeway awardees show up as Pew grantees and William Penn grantees? It's this experience that you get here, the experience and reflecting on your practice and art form, the experience and articulating who you are as an artist, how you walk in the world as an artist that prepares you, hopefully, for those larger grants. So I thank you all for being here this evening, and I thank the folks who are live streaming this. I think we can be around for a little bit, so if you have specific questions like you'd like to ask or some commentary that you'd like to share with us, we'd be glad to hear from you. And if you have questions about the application, we have Leeway staff here today. And please say hello to Pia. She's making the rounds and learning the Leeway community, and we just love that she's here tonight.